It was 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was halfway through reorganizing the office files in alphabetical order, an act that might sound noble if I weren't doing it purely to avoid filing the invoices Wolfe hadn't signed. Wolfe was upstairs. With his orchids, Fritz was in the kitchen elbow-deep in duck livers, and I was wondering if a man could be legally declared allergic to carbon paper when the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting a telegram, a florist, or someone trying to sell me on the benefits of steam heating. Instead, I got a blonde in a gray suit, wool, not too expensive, with a face like a still lake and eyes that had seen a lot of wind. "Is this the residence of Mr. Nero Wolfe?" she asked, voice crisp enough to slice an apple. "It is," I said, "and you're currently facing its secretary, Legman, charm department, and on Tuesdays, furniture mover. Come on in." She stepped inside, glancing around the front room like she was scanning it for bugs or regrets. I offered her a seat on the red leather chair and dropped into my own notebook already in hand. She didn't fidget, didn't blink. Too much, didn't seem nervous, just tired in a permanent sort of way. "My name is Miss Alma Kincaid," she said. "I'm the private secretary to Mr. Gregory Vale." That name raised an eyebrow internally. Vale was a publishing tycoon, with a smile that had graced the Times social pages more than his own bestsellers. He was known for memoirs, manifestos, and monogrammed handkerchiefs. "I'm listening," I said. She reached into her bag, a plain black number with a sensible clasp, and pulled out a folded letter. The type crisp and recent. "This arrived on Mr. Vale's desk yesterday morning," she said. "It claims to be from me. It is not." I took the paper. It was typed on Vale's official letterhead and signed with Alma's name in clean, slatted blue ink. The contents were brief but lethal, a resignation and a confession. It said she had leaked sensitive manuscripts to a rival firm, taken money under the table, and was stepping down for moral reasons. I looked up. "So let me guess, you're still employed, haven't leaked a thing. And your signature's about as genuine as a promise from a pickpocket." "Exactly. And Mr. Vale?" She hesitated. "He believes I wrote it, or wants to believe. Either way, I was told not to return to the office." That earned a low whistle. "Did you tell him it was fake?" "I did. He told me the tone was unmistakably mine." "You do often confess to corporate espionage in memos?" A thin line formed between her eyebrows. "I'm not in the mood for jokes, Mr. Goodwin." "That's unfortunate," I said, "because Nero Wolfe usually charges extra for earnestness." "What is it you want from us?" She straightened. "I want Mr. Wolfe to find out who typed that letter, and why." 10 minutes later, I was upstairs in the plant rooms, trying to lure Wolfe down without disrupting the delicate emotional balance between him and his Phalaenopsis hybrids. He eventually agreed to come, mostly because I told him the client was smart, sober, and not inclined to waste syllables. When Wolfe entered the office, he didn't offer a hand, didn't greet her, didn't even glance at me. He just dropped into his oversized chair and looked at Alma Kincaid, the way a chess master might study a bishop he hadn't yet decided to sacrifice. "You were Mr. Vale's secretary for how long?" Wolfe asked. 8 years. "You took dictation?" "Typed, edited, screened calls, tracked royalty statements, coordinated meetings, and kept 2 marriages from imploding." Wolfe almost smiled. "Very good." "And now," she said, "I've been accused of forgery and sabotage, and my career is over unless someone proves otherwise." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "There are 3 possibilities," he said. 1. You wrote the letter, then regretted it. 2. Someone forged it to remove you. Or 3. Mr. Vale orchestrated the entire affair for his own purposes. I didn't write it, so you say. The letter was typed? Yes. On your typewriter? No, I don't have one. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Miss Kincaid, let me be blunt. Why would anyone want to sabotage you? She didn't flinch. Because I know things. About Vale, about the authors. About contracts signed late at night in bars and books ghostwritten by people in debt to him. Because someone in that office wanted me out before I talked. That's the first useful thing you've said, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin will begin inquiries. You will leave a list of everyone with access to Mr. Vale's office, including janitors, editors, assistants, and mistresses. I thought you didn't take the case yet, I said. I haven't, Wolfe replied. But my curiosity has, which is often the same thing. After Miss Kincaid had been dismissed with Wolfe's usual courtesy, which is to say, none, she left behind a typed list of 12 names and a faint trace of her perfume that reminded me of lavender and litigation. Wolfe, of course, hadn't budged from his chair. She's telling the truth, I said, dropping into mine. The letter's a frame job. Wolfe sipped his beer and raised a brow. Are you now clairvoyant, Archie? I'm observant. You should. Try it sometime. He ignored me, as he often does when logic interferes with leisure. What interests me is not whether the letter is forged. I'm certain it is. But whether the forgery matters. It matters to her. That is. Sentiment. I prefer motive. I leaned forward, tapping the list. This isn't just a forged resignation. It's a professional hit. Someone wanted her gone without fingerprints. And I think it worked. Wolfe closed his eyes. That's a gesture that means he is either thinking deeply or pretending I know. Longer exist. I tried another angle. She said someone in the office was afraid she'd talk. About Vale, about contracts, about ghosts writing books they shouldn't. Wolfe's eyes opened at that. Did she use the word ghosts? Ghostwriters, I clarified. Not phantoms. That would have made it interesting, Wolfe muttered. I stood up and crossed the room. Look, I know she's not exactly holding a dead body, but this isn't trivial. We've seen bloodless murders before, reputations shredded, lives derailed. I do not accept cases for sentimental reasons. Then accept it for practical ones. She's offering a retainer. How much? I quoted the number. It wasn't extravagant, but it beat a week of unpaid lectures from Wolfe about the philosophy of legumes. Wolfe grimaced. Paltry. She's a secretary, not a Rockefeller. I do not accept employment on the basis of pity. That's fine, I said. How about professional curiosity? Someone mimicked her type, her cadence, her signature. That takes nerve. Maybe even genius. Aren't you the least bit insulted? That landed. Wolfe took a long, deliberate breath, the kind that travels through several philosophical chambers before exiting. I shall think, he said. Fritz is preparing pigeon with rosemary. I intend to enjoy it undistracted. You may pursue background inquiries, if you insist on flailing about. That's Wolfe's version of encouragement, so I flailed. I started with Gregory Vale's publishing house, Vale and Whitman, tucked inside a renovated brownstone that looked like it belonged to an accountant with a secret. The front desk sent me upstairs, and after bluffing my way past a suspicious receptionist, the kind who looked like she'd once guarded Pharaoh's tombs, I found myself face to face with Mr. Vale. He was standing behind a glass desk, adjusting his cufflinks. Like they had secrets. Early 50s, silver at the temples, tanned as if regret had never touched him. He motioned me in. Mr. Goodwin, he said. From Nero Wolfe? That's right. You've heard of us. I've heard of Wolfe. Obese man, rarely leaves. His home solves crimes between mouthfuls of quiche. That's him, I said, grinning. Only you left out genius and unbearable. Vale didn't smile. I assume this is about Miss Kincaid. It is. She's no longer in my employ. I'm aware. She submitted a letter of resignation. She confessed to leaking manuscripts. There's nothing more to discuss. Actually, I said, there's a lot. Starting with the fact that she didn't write it. Vale turned away, walked to the window. That's not my concern. Sure it is. If she didn't write it, then someone in your office committed fraud, forgery, and possibly libel. He turned back. Miss Kincaid is a capable woman, but I won't tolerate betrayal. Even when it's fictional, especially then. I stared at him. Let me ask something else. Who would benefit from her being gone? He shrugged. Everyone. She knew too much. About me, about others. She was watchful. And you're not curious who set her up? No. That was when I knew, not that he was guilty of forging the letter necessarily, but that he was hiding something worse. And he wasn't afraid of being exposed. He was afraid of being noticed. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe with his stomach full and his conscience empty. He was seated in his usual throne of mahogany and velvet, a globe of beer in hand and a book open on his lap. Well, he said, Vale isn't worried, which is what worries me. Then proceed. You mean you're taking the case? I said no such thing. Wolfe, I shall permit you to investigate. I remain uninvolved, for now. Wolfe didn't answer. That was his way of saying yes. I've learned that when Wolfe tells me to proceed, it's usually shorthand for, get your shoes dirty, but don't bleed on the carpet. So I did what I do best, poked, prodded, and asked questions in rooms that didn't want me in them. The day after my chat with Gregory Vale, I hit the usual trail. Elevator operators, receptionists, interns still wide-eyed with ambition, and editors whose caffeine intake outpaced their moral flexibility. Everyone at Vale and Whitman had a theory. Some thought Miss Kincaid quit because of burnout. Others whispered she was pregnant. One even suggested she'd fled to Brazil with a poet. But none of them could explain how her resignation letter sounded more like a legal indictment than a goodbye note. By lunchtime, I gathered little more than gossip and a mild headache. So I dropped into Hattie's luncheonette on 44th for a tuna melt and a moment to think. Halfway through my second pickle, my phone rang. It was Lon Cohen from the Gazette. And when Lon calls during lunch, it's never social. Archie, he said, I hear your Wolfe is sniffing around Vale's place. I chewed deliberately. Wolfe's doing nothing of the sort. I, on the other hand, am enjoying a fine sandwich and being insulted by reporters. You might want to switch to something stronger. Gregory Vale's dead. I stopped chewing. When? About 20 minutes ago. Shot in his office. NYPD's already there. They're calling it a break-in, but it smells off. Did the thief forget to take anything? Exactly. I paid my tab and was out the door before my sandwich could mourn its uneaten half. By the time I reached Vale and Whitman, the brownstone was swarming. Yellow tape, 2 cruisers, and a couple of detectives who looked like their neckties had been tied during a windstorm. I flashed my license, gave the name Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's operative, and waited for the usual smirk of recognition followed by begrudging access. This time, no smirk. Instead, I was waved in by a detective named Foreman, who wore a look like someone had just accused him of being the dumb twin in a pair of bricks. You Wolfe's guy? He grunted. Guilty. Don't touch anything. Wouldn't dream of it. The office upstairs was chaos in a necktie. A white sheet covered the body slumped behind the glass desk. A bloody smear traced the arc of Vale's last attempt to move, or maybe just protest the interruption to his schedule. A .38 lay on the floor like a forgotten paperweight. Robbery? I asked. Foreman snorted. Nothing's missing. Safe untouched. Watch still on the wrist. Looks more like he let someone in. That would imply he trusted them. Yeah, or they had a reason to be there, I nodded. Or both. While Foreman wandered off to question a junior editor who looked 2 breaths from a breakdown, I took the liberty of observing what Wolfe would have noticed. The chair across from the desk had been adjusted, moved recently. There was a torn corner of paper under the blotter. I flipped it out with a pen, a typed fragment with the words, ... go no further, Kincaid knows. That got my attention. I folded it and slid it into my notebook. Wolfe would want it. And if I handed it to foreman, it'd disappear into evidence limbo faster than you can say, inadmissible. Before I could retreat, the elevator dinged enter Miss Kincaid. She hadn't been told. Judging by the way her steps slowed when she saw the tape, and stopped entirely when she saw me. Her eyes found the sheet behind the desk. They widened. "Oh, God," she whispered. "No, Miss Kincaid," I said gently. "Maybe not the best time for a visit. I had an appointment. To get my last paycheck. Mr. Vale said he'd have it today." Foreman approached like a man smelling smoke. "You know her?" "She's a client," I said before she could answer. Foreman raised an eyebrow. "Convenient." "Not especially. We were hired before he was dead. You can check the timestamps." Miss Kincaid was pale but composed. "I didn't kill him." "Nobody said you did," Foreman muttered. "Yet," she looked at me. "Is that why you were asking questions? Did you know something would happen?" "No," I said. "But someone else clearly did." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened with his eyes closed while I gave the full report. When I reached the part about the scrap of paper, he opened them. "You kept it?" "Would have been lost otherwise." He held out a hand. I gave it to him. He sniffed. "Carbon copy. Remnants of an original typed by a different machine. Note the misaligned N. Same as the fake resignation letter?" "No, that had an offset E and inconsistent line pressure." "This is a third machine," I frowned. 3 typewriters, 3 threads. Or 3 attempts to control the same narrative, Wolfe said. Someone wanted Miss Kincaid gone. Then someone wanted Vale dead. It remains to be seen if those someones are one and the same. I sighed. "We're in." He nodded once. "Fritz," he called, "bring tea." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what counts as Nero Wolfe declaring war. There's a rhythm to chasing murder in New York, and if you don't dance to it, you get stepped on. I spent the next day slipping into and out of places where people talk too much or not at all. My job was simple. Find the cracks in the story before Wolfe had to get off his chair. First stop, the Royal Arms Hotel. Uptown, Miss Kincaid's. Current place of residence. Nothing fancy, but not a dive either. The kind of joint where the wallpaper pretends not to notice things. She was dressed in gray again, which I was beginning to suspect wasn't fashion so much as camouflage. Her eyes darted around the hallway before she let me in, like danger was hiding behind every fire extinguisher. "I can't believe he's dead," she said before I could even ask how she liked her eggs in the morning. "You weren't fond of him yesterday. That doesn't mean I wanted him murdered. Plenty of people wanted him dead, Miss Kincaid. I'm just trying to sort the ones who wanted it from the ones who made it happen." She exhaled slowly. "I didn't do it." "I believe you," I said, and mostly meant it. "But someone typed that resignation letter, not you. Not your machine." She hesitated. "There's something I didn't tell you." "Why start now?" I said. "Go on." She reached into her purse and handed me a small envelope, crinkled and faintly scented like lilac and regret. "I found this in my desk drawer a few days before I left. No name, no handwriting, just this." I opened it. Inside was a torn slip of typing paper. "Familiar font. He'll bury you," it read. "Unless you vanish first." "Nice guy," I muttered. She nodded. I thought it was a threat, or a warning, could be both. Vale ever mention blackmail? Or enemies, someone he was scared of? She frowned. He was always careful, always watching what he said, especially after hours. "Any enemies in the office?" She paused. "There's a copy editor, Gentry Moss, bit of a snake. Charming, when he needs to be. But he and Vale had arguments behind closed doors more than once." I filed the name. "Anyone else?" "The accountant, Mr. Felix Broom. He didn't like that I was hired. Said I was a decorative mistake from Vale's college nostalgia." "Did Vale and you go back that far?" "He was a mentor," she said, "but she didn't meet my eyes." "Sure," I said. "And I'm the Easter Bunny." From there, I dropped by the Vale and Whitman offices again, this time with the police tape down and the grief hung up like an overcoat nobody wanted. Gentry Moss was tall, silver-haired, and shaped like a Huron that had taken up smoking too. "Survive city winters. I adored Greg," he said with a practiced sigh. "He was a tyrant with a god complex, but he paid on time." "Did you notice anything unusual before his death?" Gentry shrugged. "Aside from him walking into the office like he owned my soul, he was tense, kept muttering about papers and proof, and asking if I'd seen the company safe unlocked. Was it? No, but the paranoia was new and charming." "What?" "About Miss Kincaid." Gentry's smile twisted. "Pretty, competent, and temporary. I always said she wouldn't last." "Because she was bad at the job?" "Because Greg only ever hired secretaries for one of two reasons, and typing was rarely one of them." I resisted the urge to introduce his teeth to my knuckles. "Did you type her resignation?" "I barely typed my own edits." "But you know who did." "I'm a copy editor, Mr. Goodwin, not a clairvoyant." "But you're also a liar," I said, and turned to leave before he could decide whether to be offended. My last stop was Felix Broom, the accountant, who looked like a jar of gray paste had put on spectacles and gotten offended by jazz. "I won't discuss Mr. Vale's financials," he said. "Fine, then let's talk about his corpse." "That's in very poor taste, and murder isn't." "Listen, I don't care about the numbers. I care about what you said about Miss Kincaid." "I was misquoted." "By who? Yourself?" He adjusted his glasses. "She was a distraction." Vale liked distractions. It made him sloppy. "Sloppy? Enough to get killed?" Felix stared. "That's not what I said." "No," I said. "But it's what you meant." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was nursing a beer and glaring at a dictionary like it had insulted his lineage. I handed him a typed transcript of everything, quotes, names, and a copy of the envelope Kincaid had handed over. "You suspect the letter writer was also the murderer?" he asked. "Maybe. Or maybe someone was trying to scare her out of the building so they could get at Vale without her in the way." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "The common denominator is not the letter, it is the typewriter." "You think all 3 pieces, resignation, threat, and the torn note, came from the same source?" "No," he said. "I think 3 different machines were used to mask a single voice. Someone trying to look like 3 people. Or 3 people taking orders from one." I nodded. "A conspiracy?" "A triangle," Wolfe said. "And triangles are stable until one corner collapses." "And which corner is next?" He folded his hands. "Find out who had access to all 3 machines. And Archie, do be careful. Idiocy is excusable. Assassination is not." Wolfe rarely admits interest. That would suggest the world had surprised him, which he claims is both impossible and beneath him. But I've worked with the man long enough to know when the lock has clicked. That evening, he skipped the usual grumbling about my brutish typing when I handed over the compiled notes from my rounds. He didn't even correct my misspelling of scurrilous, which meant either he had gone deaf or he was thinking too hard to nitpick. I stood by the bookshelves, arms folded. "Well, confound it, Archie," he said at last, leaning back in his chair. "This is a damnably inelegant crime." "Agreed." A typed resignation that could not have been typed by the secretary in question. A warning note typed anonymously. And a man stabbed in his locked office with no weapon in sight. Who hates clarity that much? Someone clever, but not wise. There is too much effort here, too much layering. Like a parfait? Like a child pretending to be a magician. He grunted. But even the clumsiest illusion can distract the eye, if timed well. "Want me to go dig up some typewriter models?" "No," he said, and sat up straighter. "What I want is Miss Kincaid." "You and me both, boss, but she's not exactly lining up dates. I want her here, Archie. At this house." In that chair. You want to interrogate her? I want to examine her. Same difference, I made the call. She sounded surprised, maybe even spooked, but she agreed to come by the next afternoon. I promised her coffee, honesty, and a chair that didn't creak. Fritz whipped up one of those delicate cucumber and caper sandwiches Wolfe pretends not to like, and I had the guest chair fluffed by noon. At 1 o'clock sharp, Miss Kincaid walked in like someone entering a courtroom for the second time. Wolfe, of course, didn't rise. He merely nodded, then gestured to the chair. "You've been frightened," he said without preamble. She blinked. "Yes, and misled." Her voice dropped. "Probably. And perhaps," he added, steepling his fingers, "used." Her lips pressed into a flat line. "I didn't kill him." "I believe you," Wolfe said. "But belief is ornamental. Proof is what matters." He leaned forward a half-inch, which by Wolfe's standards was equivalent to a headbutt. "Tell me precisely how you were hired." She cleared her throat. "A month ago. I was referred by an agency. I didn't meet Mr. Vale in person until the second day of work. And the job itself? Easy. Almost too easy. He was barely in the office. Most of the time I typed up press releases or filed invoices." "Press releases," Wolfe murmured. "Typed where?" "My desk. Royal model. A little stiff." "And the note you received, the threatening one, that was typed on the same machine?" She shook her head. "No, different font. Lighter ink." I didn't think much of it at the time. Wolfe's nostrils flared slightly. He was thinking. He was always thinking. "Miss Kincaid, did anyone else ever sit at your desk?" She frowned. "Not that I know of. Maybe the night janitor?" "Doubtful," Wolfe said. "Tell me about Mr. Moss." Her brow furrowed. "Gentry?" "Charming, slimy. He always smiled like he was about to eat you." "Motivation?" "He wanted Vale's job. He thought he deserved it. Claimed Vale stole credit for his edits," Wolfe grunted. "And Mr. Broom?" "Scary in a quiet way. Always watching. Once, I thought he was following me." "Was he?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I thought I saw him outside my building last week, but he ducked away." Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they glittered with interest. "You are to do nothing for the next 24 hours. Say nothing. Visit no one." "What? If someone contacts you," Wolfe interrupted. "Note the time, the tone, and the method. Nothing else. Are we understood?" She nodded, visibly unnerved. I walked her out. On the stoop, she paused. "He didn't deserve to die," she said quietly. "Even if he was complicated." "Complicated doesn't get you stabbed," I said. "Secrets do." Back inside, Wolfe had already summoned me with a grunt. "I want Mr. Gentry Moss here tomorrow at 2, he said. "And Felix Broom the day after. You're holding court?" "No, I am applying heat. This crime is not about rage or passion, Archie. It is about a lie, the kind too large to breathe comfortably. And you think one of them is already sweating?" Wolfe's mouth twitched. "They will be." When Wolfe starts stacking suspects, it's not for show. It's architectural, like laying out stones for a bridge he plans to walk across, blindfolded while quoting Pliny the Elder. The trick is getting him the right stones. By 2 o'clock sharp. The next day, Gentry Moss was on Wolfe's yellow leather chair, looking like he expected to be knighted or arrested, maybe both. He wore a mint green tie with a sharkskin suit, the kind of thing you only wear if you want people to remember you and maybe hate you a little. His hair was parted down the middle with the confidence of someone who's never been fired. Wolfe didn't greet him. He looked up from his copy of Suetonius, closed it with a sigh, and said, "Tell me about the letter." Moss blinked. "Pardon?" "The resignation letter. You were the one who found it, were you not?" "I was," Moss said, leaning forward. "I saw it on the secretary's desk. I assumed she'd left abruptly. Then we found Vale well, you know." "Indeed." Wolfe's voice had the warmth of a frosted doorknob. You presumed Miss Kincaid typed the letter? Who else would have? That, Mr. Moss, is precisely what I intend to uncover. After Moss left, I did my usual cross-check routine, called the office building's maintenance supervisor, the typewriter repair guy, even the deli next door to Vale's press firm. Everyone remembered Moss. No one liked him. The next morning, Felix Broom arrived. No mint tie, no shine. He looked like he'd been poured into a gray wool suit from a height of 10 feet and hadn't landed right. He sat with his knees too close together and his hands flat on his thighs like a schoolboy waiting for his name to be called at roll. You were close with Mr. Vale? Wolfe asked, voice flat. Broom nodded. We worked late together often. He trusted me with copy he didn't want Moss to see. Ah, Wolfe said. And yet Miss Kincaid believed you might have followed her home. Beat. I was worried about her, Broom said, eyes darting. She was scared. I thought I might protect her. From whom? Another beat. A breath. Moss. Wolfe made no comment. He simply looked at me, which was shorthand for noted. With those two now officially placed on the board, we started to triangulate. I brought in the building receptionist, Doria Wells, a gum-snapping brunette with a memory like a steel trap and a mouth that didn't wait for invitations. I saw Gentry Moss leave that office before the cops got there. She told me. Fast, real fast, looked pale, didn't even nod. What time? Maybe 10 minutes before the police sirens. And Felix? Sat in the lobby for half an hour like a ghost, didn't even blink. I gave her a 10 spot and a compliment on her earrings, then reported back. 2 types of nerves, I said. The fleeing kind and the frozen kind. Precisely, Wolfe muttered, scribbling names on his notepad, a rare act, like watching a glacier tap dance. By the end of that day, the list was Gentry Moss, ambitious, unpleasant, first to find the body. No solid alibi. Felix Broom, quiet, loyal, maybe obsessed. Possibly stalking. Miss Kincaid, likely innocent, but too many question marks to ignore. A ghostwriter, an unnamed fifth party. Someone who typed that letter, and maybe the threat. Someone no one mentioned yet. I paced the office, chewing a toothpick. So what's your angle? I have 4 people and only 3 truths, Wolfe said. Which means one of them is lying about something unrelated. That narrows it down. No, he said, that complicates it. If someone lies reflexively, Archie, they may do it even when they don't need to. That muddies all waters. I raised an eyebrow. You think someone killed Vale without knowing the whole picture? I think someone killed Vale while trying to prevent someone else from doing it first. Now, that was a new one. We needed leverage. So I paid a second visit to Miss Kincaid's apartment. She lived in a walk-up on 12th, tidy and underfurnished, with a view of a crumbling brick wall and a pigeon who stared in like he owned stock in the place. I'm being followed, she said as soon as I walked in. By who? I don't know. But someone's watching the building. I checked the street from her window. Across the way, an idling car with dark glass and an engine too quiet to be a taxi. You think it's Moss? I asked. Maybe, or Felix, or someone else. Anyone else type on your machine while you were gone? She hesitated. Well, she said, there was a woman. A week before Vale died. She came in early one day, said she was from copy support. I'd never seen her before. And Vale okayed that? He said it was a new hire from upstairs. I left early that day. A 5th player. Finally, back home, I told Wolfe. His eyebrows lifted, a visible earthquake. She typed the resignation, he said flatly. Not Miss Kincaid. Why? Because she had to. He stood, and walked to the Globe bar to pour himself a brandy, which meant he was thinking dangerously fast. That woman was not staff. She was an agent. Agent? Not governmental. An agent of whoever was blackmailing Vale. I blinked. Wait, what? I suspected blackmail. Now I'm sure. Vale wasn't resigning, he was ceding. And someone ensured the records showed it was voluntary. It wasn't hard to find the crack. The tricky part was recognizing it wasn't in the wall, it was in the wallpaper. I was halfway through a follow-up with Daria Wells, the sharp-tongued receptionist, when she said something that stuck like gum on the sole of a new shoe. "I already told you," she said, swiping a strand of black hair behind her ear. Moss came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Right," I said, taking notes in my head. "And Broom?" She gave me a funny look. "He wasn't even in that day." That froze my pen. "Come again?" "He wasn't in, called in sick. Said he had food poisoning." "That's not what he told me." She folded her arms. "Well then, one of us has a funny sense of time, or he's got a funny sense of truth." Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the update with all the trimmings. He was seated behind his desk with a glass of sherry and the usual expression of someone enduring the sound of humanity. "He said he was in the lobby," I finished. "Daria says he wasn't even in the building." "That is not an inconsistency." Wolfe replied, "It is a fissure. Bring him. Now?" "No, Archie. Wait until the moon is full and he grows fur. Yes, now." I grinned. "I love when you're punchy." He closed his eyes. "Archie, for the love of decency." 25 minutes later, Felix Broom sat in the red armchair, hands clutched like a penitent schoolboy. "I was there," he said. "I just ... didn't go up." "Explain," Wolfe said, his tone sharp and effortless like a scalpel resting on velvet. Felix gulped. "I told Daria I was out sick. I didn't want anyone to know I was in the building, but I needed to see Victoria." "Miss Kincaid? You mean spy on her?" I asked, pulling up a chair. "I thought Moss was threatening her." I stayed in the alley beside the building. When I saw her leave around 5, I followed her from a distance, just to be sure. "That explains your alibi," I said. "Or rather, your lack of one. She didn't know I was there. I swear I didn't go near her apartment. I just watched the building for half an hour." "You saw no one else enter?" Wolfe asked. Felix thought for a moment. "Actually, yes, a woman, black coat, red scarf. She went into the office early." Wolfe's eyes opened. "Early? Before anyone else?" "Around 8:15. And you didn't think that might be worth mentioning before now?" I said. I didn't think it mattered. I assumed she worked there. Wolfe drummed his fingers once, then stopped. "Describe her face." Felix hesitated. "Sharp nose, heavy lipstick. Blonde, but her roots were dark." I looked over at Wolfe. "Matches what Miss Kincaid said." Wolfe leaned back, lips tightening. "She was not from the office," he murmured. "She was from the circle." "The what now?" I asked. He waved his hand. "The network, the coercers, the people behind Vale's resignation letter." He paused. "She planted that letter." The shift was tectonic. We no longer had 4 suspects. We had a ring, or at least a shadow of one. And Felix? His alibi had burst like a cheap balloon at a banker's ball. "You're not off the hook," I told him. "Outside on the stoop. But if you're telling the truth, you just moved from murderer to witness." He nodded. "I'll testify. I'll do whatever you need." "Oh, I'm sure you will. Just don't move without telling me. I'll be watching you the same way." "You watched her?" He nodded again, pale as a moth. Inside, Wolfe poured himself a brandy and said, "We are near the fulcrum." "That's so?" "Yes, we now have a verified false alibi, a shadow operative, and a murder designed to look like resignation. The question is no longer who killed Vale. It's who told them to." "Precisely." To tighten the net, I took the next day to visit a certain retired typist named Margot Hendley, a former employee of Vale's company who was known for noticing everything. She lived in Queens, in a lemon-yellow house filled with porcelain cats and lace doilies. But her memory was ironclad. "I only met that woman once," she said, sipping tea. She claimed to be in typesetting, but she had a northern accent. Vale hated northern dialects. Did he question her? No, she said. He smiled. But he was scared. I saw it. He looked like a man sitting on a bomb. And after she left, he burned something in the trash. A sheet of paper. What kind? She hesitated. I think. It looked like a check. Back at the brownstone, I reported in. Wolfe's face had the rare glow of a man seeing his theory confirmed. He was paying them, he said softly. The blackmail had escalated. Maybe he stopped paying, or tried to reverse it. And that sealed his fate. He looked at the desk, then at the orchid clock. Archie, he said, invite everyone. The suspects. Miss Kincaid, Moss, Broom, and tell Fritz to prepare something appropriately theatrical. I raised an eyebrow. You're staging the confrontation already? Yes, he said, eyes gleaming. But not to identify the killer. No, to make them identify each other. There are two kinds of trouble in my line of work. The kind that rumbles like thunder and gives you time to duck, and the kind that steps out from behind a curtain and slaps you cold across the mouth. Mine was the second kind. It came in the form of a guy in a camel hair coat and too much cologne, waiting for me outside Saul Panzer's office on West 48th. Archie Goodwin? He asked. That depends who's asking, I said, still chewing the last bite of my streetcar hot dog. He smiled, the way a cop smiles before confiscating your lunch. You've been asking questions about Mr. Vale. You're gonna stop. I swallowed. Am I? Yeah, he said, then leaned in. Or next time we find you before lunch. He turned and walked away like he owned the sidewalk. Saul stepped out just as the guy rounded the corner. Friend of yours? He asked, just a thoughtful citizen concerned about my sodium intake. Saul and I went back to his place and laid it out. I hadn't planned to get him involved this deep, but when threats show up on the street, it's time to phone the varsity. Saul is lean, quiet, and probably more dangerous than most handguns. He's also the guy you want when the air starts to feel thin. He poured 2 glasses of seltzer and leaned against the sink. That threat was coordinated, he said. Not freelance. I nodded. And that means they're getting nervous. He tilted his glass. So push harder. Wolfe already scheduled a brownstone showdown. Saul grinned. Then I'll be there, with my ears open and my shoes clean. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was not thrilled to hear about the encounter. He was even less thrilled when I told him what I planned to do next. You will not provoke them. Too late, I said, loosening my tie. They're already provoked. That guy didn't just threaten me. He outed their timeline. How so? If they're issuing warnings now, they know we're close. Which means someone inside the ring is sweating. Wolfe pressed his fingers together. You are suggesting a breach. I'm suggesting a leak. Maybe even someone who wants out. Wolfe closed his eyes. Very well, but do not get murdered. I have no wish to retrain another assistant. That night, I revisited Daria Wells under the pretense of needing clarification. What I really wanted was to rattle her cage and see what fell out. She poured me weak tea and weaker excuses. I don't know what you think I know, she said. I don't think you know anything, I said casually. But you heard something. She bit her lip. When you came back from lunch the day of the murder, what did you hear? She hesitated. There were voices in the supply room. Recognize them? One was Victoria. The other, I thought it was Vale. Vale was dead by then. Her face changed. Then who? I leaned forward. That's what I'm trying to find out. She nodded, slowly. There was a third voice. Male, rough, didn't belong. Could it have been the guy in the red scarf? She blinked. How do you know about him? Boom. Back at the office, I wrote everything down while Wolfe paced. Yes, paced. When Wolfe voluntarily moved more than 5 feet on a carpet, you could safely assume civilization was under threat. Archie, he said, voice tight. We must presume. The voice in the supply room was one of two things: the killer returning to the scene, or someone tampering. With what? He stopped pacing. The typewriter. It clicked. The resignation letter, I said. They didn't bring it in. They typed it there. Indeed. Meaning Doria heard the murder being cleaned up in real time. Possibly. Or she heard the letter being forged before the murder occurred. That single quotes S. Wolfe nodded. Yes. Later that night, I walked to the corner store for a loaf of rye and was halfway down 35th when a black car rolled up slow beside me. Two men stepped out. Same cologne as before. Evening, one said, flashing a silver glint under his coat. Time for a ride. I don't usually carry a gun. Wolfe hates the noise. But I do carry brass keys and a stubborn chin. I'm flattered. Fellas, I said. But I don't get into cars without candy. One of them moved fast, tried to grab me by the collar. He missed. He didn't miss the fist I planted into his ribs, though. The second guy lunged, and I dodged, then bolted back toward the brownstone. 3 steps ahead of their curses. They didn't follow. I got to Wolfe's front door panting and bleeding from the wrist. He looked up from his book and said, I presume they didn't offer a receipt. 2 goons, I said. Same threats. 1 broken nose. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Yours? Nope. Good. Fritz bandaged my wrist in silence, then handed me a bourbon with a disapproving grunt. I took it, grateful. Wolfe poured himself a glass of cider and said, Tomorrow, Archie, we invite them again. The suspects? No, he said. The shadows. The last time Wolfe entertained more than 2 strangers at once, it was a city health inspector and a state senator. And only one of them left with their dignity intact. So when he told me to gather the players for a meeting in the office, I knew he meant business. The invitations went out that morning. Subtle summons delivered via phone, telegram, or personal visit. My knees still regret the uptown walk to Moss's apartment. By 4 p.m., Wolfe's office was cleaner than a nun's diary. Fritz even broke out the good silver for the tea tray. The lineup, seated uncomfortably in our feigned row of red chairs. Victoria Kincaid, stiff and elegant as ever, her fingers knotted in her lap like a silent prayer. Felix Broom, twitchy, underdressed, and sweating like a stool pigeon at a feather convention. Doria Wells, who greeted me with a glare that could etch glass. Harlan Moss, calm, but with the sharp edge of a man who's lied professionally. And finally, a new addition. Miss Evelyn Spruce, a corporate liaison with the kind of vague title that usually translates to handler, fixer, or cleanup crew. She wore black, like mourning or camouflage. Wolfe took his seat behind the desk as if descending onto a throne. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, you are here because I permitted it. Moss shifted. Broom blinked. Doria inhaled slowly through her nose. Wolfe continued, you were present, directly or adjacently, to the death of Andrew Vale. This is no longer a question. The method and motive, however, remain entangled. We will untangle them now. No one moved. He gestured for me. Double quotes, Mr. Goodwin will now ask you each one question. Only one. Consider your answer carefully. It is not your safety at risk. It is your plausibility. I stood. I had notes. I didn't use them. To Kincaid, I asked, what did Vale whisper to you the night before he died? She hesitated. He said, they know. Burn it. I nodded. To Moss, where were you between 7:30 and 8:15, the morning of the resignation letter? He blinked. In my office. No receptionist saw you enter. I came through the back. I raised an eyebrow. Locked or unlocked? He hesitated. Unlocked, he said. 2 slowly. Strike 1. To Felix Broom. Why did you lie about being sick? I told you already. Not me. Them. The group stared. Felix looked at Victoria. I was trying to protect her. She didn't flinch, which made it worse. To Daria. Did you see anyone else go into the supply room? She looked down. Yes. Heads turned. A woman, she said. Red scarf, blunt blonde cut. She went in early, before we opened. Wolfe raised his eyes, slowly, to Evelyn Spruce. Do you know this woman? He asked. I declined to answer. You are not in court, madame. No, she said, crossing her legs. This room has worse consequences. There it was. The fear. Wolfe leaned forward. Miss Spruce, you are not a suspect, not yet, but you are a carrier of consequence. Whoever employed you, whatever instructions you delivered, you are now in breach of a higher order. She stayed silent. I said, you helped coordinate Vale's resignation, which was actually a murder. She smiled faintly. I helped prevent embarrassment. Wolfe stood. And that did it. Everyone stiffened like we'd been plugged into a live wire. Wolfe rarely stood unless it meant a judgment was about to fall. Miss Kincaid, he said, you were coerced into typing a portion of the letter. She flinched. Yes, Mr. Moss, you signed it. No, Wolfe said. The signature was forged, but you supplied the model. That is your crime. Moss looked away. Mr. Broom, Wolfe said. You witnessed the coercion and failed to report it. You were a coward, but not a killer. Then he turned to Evelyn. And you, madam, are the center spoke. A messenger with no handwriting. A ghost with a perfect memory. The resignation was a lie, but the silence afterward was yours. She said nothing. Wolfe sat down. I will give you 1 hour, he said, to explain yourself to the authorities. After that, I explain you to the press. The room exploded with noise, objections, denials, confessions halfway formed. But Spruce just stood up, adjusted her gloves, and left. No one stopped her. Not even me. Later, in the kitchen, Wolfe told Fritz to serve trout. I poured myself a drink. Should disappear, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. But her absence is its own indictment. You think she run? No, I think she report. And whoever receives her message will know the line is frayed. Are we in danger? Wolfe sipped his cider. Always. The morning after the lineup, I woke up with that peculiar sense of unfinished business, the kind that clings to your collar and whispers, don't trust the silence. Wolfe, for his part, spent the evening ignoring human interaction, buried in his orchids and muttering Latin at the Cypripedium. Hybrids like they'd reveal the killer first, but I knew better. Spruce hadn't run, which was either brave, stupid, or strategic. Around 10:30, the phone rang. Fritz answered, then peeked into the office with the expression of a man who'd rather not be the messenger. Wolfe groaned. It's Lieutenant Rocliffe, Fritz sighed. He sounds not thrilled. Rocliffe was never thrilled. I took the call. What now, Lieutenant? We found a second body. My mouth went dry. Who? There was a pause on the other end. Not for drama. Rocliffe was incapable of that. Felix Broom, he said. Dead in his apartment. Strangled, sometime last night. I didn't need to ask if it looked like suicide. Strangulation doesn't work well as a solo act. Wolfe's reaction was immediate for him. He frowned. He looked at the ceiling. Then, with supreme resignation, he said, "Get your coat." I blinked. "You're coming?" "I am not," he barked. "You are. Take notes. Observe everything. And if you must speak, speak as if you are me. Grumpy and omniscient?" "Precisely." Broom's apartment was a 10-minute walk and a 30-minute ride through the kind of traffic that made me question humanity. The building was a fourth-floor walk-up, thin walls, sad carpet, and a smell of old tobacco and resignation. Rocliffe was waiting at the door with a crime scene. Tech, a notebook, and an expression that could curdle milk. "You here to obstruct?" he asked, just observing. "You get to do the obstructing." He didn't smile. Strangled from behind with piano wire. No signs of forced entry. Door locked from the inside. Fire escape open. Classic setup. Classic message. I took a slow turn around the room. Cheap bookshelf. Rattan chair. A typewriter. 2 cups in the sink, one with lipstick. I raised an eyebrow. Rowcliffe caught it. We're running prints. Could be his, could be hers. Whose? Victoria Kincaid's been here before, he said. Neighbors said she visited a few nights ago. We're bringing her in. That wasn't the twist. The twist was the photo. On the wall. Crooked, nearly hidden behind a lamp. A younger Broom, beaming, standing beside none other than Andrew Vale. I leaned closer. Behind them, barely visible in the background, was a third figure. Blurry, half-turned. Evelyn Spruce. Back. At the brownstone, I laid out the facts like pieces on a chessboard. So Spruce wasn't just a fixer, I said. She was part of it, years ago, maybe longer. Wolfe poured beer into a heavy glass. Indeed, and Vale knew. So did Broom. Which made them both threats. He nodded. And now both are silent. Which means Kincaid's next. Wolfe. Didn't argue. At 3 p.m., Victoria Kincaid walked into the office without knocking. She looked pale. Worn down to the seams. They questioned me, she said. About Felix. And what did you tell them? Wolfe asked without looking up. The truth. That we had tea, that he cried, that I left him alive. You omitted the part, Wolfe said, where he handed you a key. She froze. Archie Goodwin, mind reader. Wolfe motioned to me. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the object Kincaid had left in my coat pocket this morning. A brass key with a V-shaped insignia. You're not very subtle, I said. That's good for us. Less so for you. I didn't know where else to go, she said, collapsing into a chair. Felix told me. If anything happened to him. There's single quotes as a storage unit on Delancey. Unit V24. Containing? Wolfe. Asked. She swallowed. Evidence, letters, recordings, maybe even a will. The room still. Wolfe tapped the armrest of his chair with 2 fingers. A second twist, he murmured. A dead man who still has a voice. The key was real. The storage facility was real. I confirmed both by 7 that evening. The unit, locked, undisturbed, was untouched. Though I had the creeping sense, I wasn't the only one to find it interesting. Inside, boxes, envelopes, a pair of notebooks, and an envelope addressed to Wolfe. Handwritten. We didn't open it right away, because just as I turned to leave the unit, a shadow moved behind the row of doors. Someone was watching, and then they were gone. You don't really know what normal looks like until you've spent enough time in Nero Wolfe's brownstone, particularly in that strange hour after something explosive happens. Most people would rush to call the cops, light a cigarette, or pace a hole into the rug. Wolfe? He retreats to the orchids. That's what he did as soon as I handed him the envelope from Broom's posthumous gift box. Without a word, he rose, nodded to Fritz, and vanished upstairs to the plant rooms, leaving me with nothing but suspicion, a sour stomach, and Victoria Kincaid's silent presence in the chair opposite mine. Is he always like that? She finally asked, folding her hands. Define like that, I replied. Withdrawn, detached, arrogant. Only when he's breathing. She gave a weak laugh. I could tell she was running on nerves and caffeine. Her lipstick had faded and her blouse was wrinkled from sitting too long. I didn't say anything. I'm a detective, not a fashion critic. Fritz appeared with a pot of tea and his usual calm. He poured without asking, placed a slice of pear tart in front of Victoria, and nodded to me with his subtle code. Keep her calm. Wolfe's thinking. It was a system that worked surprisingly well. Miss Kincaid, I said, keeping my tone light. While Wolfe communes with his chlorophyll, let's clarify a few things. For example, why didn't you mention Evelyn Spruce's name yesterday? She blinked. I didn't think she was relevant. She worked for Vale. She's in a photo with him and Broom, and both of those men are now dead. I never saw that photo. Doesn't change the fact that she was part of something." Victoria hesitated, then said, "There were whispers about an old cover-up, something to do with Vale's early investments. But Felix never told me details. He just said some people have very long shadows." I leaned back, watching her face. "How long a shadow are we talking?" She sipped the tea. "The kind that makes you disappear if you step on it." Upstairs, Wolfe was doing his own kind of digging among the orchids. I'd been up there often enough to know the sound of him pacing between the benches, muttering Latin, adjusting the misting controls like they held the secrets of humanity. Theodore Horstman, our orchid nurse and part-time botanical therapist, stood beside him, misting a row of Miltonia with exaggerated patience. "I take it," Theodore said. "The world is ending again?" "No," Wolfe said. "Worse, it's unraveling." Theodore raised an eyebrow. "Unraveling usually precedes ending." Wolfe didn't answer. He held the envelope from Broom, still sealed, between two fingers like it was radioactive. He hadn't opened it. "Not yet. You're delaying," Theodore said quietly. "I am savoring. You're avoiding." "Possibly." After a pause, Wolfe added, "It is rarely comforting to learn what a dead man wants to tell you." By the time Wolfe returned to the office 40 minutes later, he was composed, fed, and 5% grumpier, which meant he was ready. Took his seat, opened the envelope with one smooth motion, and scanned its contents without a word. I watched his eyes narrow. Twice, he reread the last paragraph. Then he passed the letter to me. It read, "Mr. Wolfe, if you're reading this, I am no longer in a position to explain myself, which may be for the best. I'm no hero. I didn't stop it when I should have. And I didn't leave when I still could. But I did one thing right. I kept the papers. They're in this unit. You'll find the ledger, the sealed tape, and the court documents Vale had buried. Everything connects to the letter Evelyn destroyed. It wasn't hers to erase. Andrew Vale was many things, but clean wasn't one of them. And Evelyn, she helped him vanish the trail. If I hadn't seen her do it myself in '94, I wouldn't have believed it. Tell Victoria I'm sorry. You'll know what to do." Felix Broom. I let out a low whistle. "The letter she didn't type." Wolfe nodded. "Once, but she destroyed it nonetheless. And now 2 people are dead because of it." "3, Wolfe said. I looked up. 3? There will be a 3rd, perhaps a 4th. This isn't over. It has only been allowed to fester." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "We must draw her in. Spruce? Yes, she knows we have the files. She will act. And when she does, we shall finally have the answer to a very peculiar question." "What's that?" Wolfe's eyes gleamed. "Why would a secretary destroy a letter she didn't type?" "There are lies, and then there are the kind of lies you wrap in tears, guilt, and the shaky sincerity of a person who looks like they've been chased by their own conscience for a week and a half. Unfortunately, Nero Wolfe has no tolerance for either. At precisely 9:03 the next morning, while Wolfe was finishing his eggs, poached, not runny, and sipping his beer, room temperature, not hoppy, our doorbell rang. I just set down my own coffee when I opened the door to find none other than Evelyn Spruce, the ghost herself, standing on our stoop. She looked even more haunted than she had in the photo from '94. Black gloves, charcoal coat, a face that had been rehearsing remorse in the mirror for hours. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, breathlessly, "I'd like to confess." "Well, hell, I'll allow her 10 minutes, Wolfe said, without looking up from his morning gazette. Then, "She must leave. She's not delivering a parcel, sir. She says she's confessing. Then she has 5. We escorted her in." Evelyn Spruce sat across from Wolfe in the red leather chair that had witnessed more falsehoods than a court docket in July. Her hands twisted the hem of her gloves until the seams curled. I was there the day the letter went. Missing, she said. I burned it. I was afraid. You didn't type it, Wolfe said flatly. No, she admitted. But I read it, and I knew what it meant. Mr. Vale had been doing some questionable dealings. That letter would have exposed everything. Why burn it? I loved him. Wolfe made a sound in his throat. It wasn't quite a scoff, but it was from the same continent. And now, I asked, why the tearful confession? Because Felix is dead. And I know I'm next. By whose hand? She hesitated. I don't know. But I found this under my door last night. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I took it and read. You can't erase the past, but someone can erase you. Typed. No signature. Generic stationery. The kind of thing any typewriter happy creep could toss into your mailbox and make your spine do a pirouette. Wolfe examined her face. This note is meaningless. Meaningless? Evelyn's voice rose. Someone killed Felix, and now you come to us seeking what? Forgiveness? Protection? Or simply a forum to salve your conscience? She opened her mouth, then closed. Wolfe turned to me. Archie. Miss Spruce is no longer welcome here. Come again? She's lying. About what? About everything. After she left, shoulders hunched, scarf fluttering, I stood in the doorway and watched her descend the brownstone steps like a condemned soul who'd found no salvation inside. Back upstairs, Wolfe had gone into deep hum mode. That was never a good sign unless you were one of his orchids or a man who enjoyed mental agony with his lunch. She knew Broom had the files, I said. She suspected, Wolfe corrected. But she didn't know for sure. And yet she comes now? Convenient. She's scared. She's playing scared. Badly. I paced. You don't think she burned the letter? I think she wanted us to think she did. Then who actually did? That, Archie, is the question. It took only 3 hours for the second performance of the day. Around 2:15, I got a call. From one of my favorite human contradictions, Lieutenant Rocliffe. He'd always hated Wolfe's guts and mine by proxy, but for some reason, he kept coming back like a guilty dog to a stolen steak. You'll want to know this, he said. Spruce is in the hospital. Overdose. Intentional? Looks that way. Sleeping pills and whiskey. Is she talking? Nope, she left a note. What did it say? She confessed. Said she killed Vale to protect a man she once loved. Broom? Nope, someone named Michael Raines. I nearly dropped the phone. Michael Raines was a ghost from the Vale Group's earliest scandals. A whistleblower who'd vanished sometime around 1995. Rumor had it he took a payoff to disappear. Others said he died in the Caribbean with a false passport and 2 margaritas. But if Spruce named him ... when I brought the news to Wolfe, he didn't flinch. He didn't even shift in his chair. He simply said, then she's bought herself time. What? Time? The time it takes us to find the man she's blaming. You think Raines is alive? I think Evelyn Spruce is many things, but not creative. If she named him, it's because she believes he won't come forward to deny it. I blinked. Which makes it the perfect red herring. Indeed. At dinner that evening, lamb shoulder with garlic reduction, Fritz outdid himself. Wolfe announced we would be seeing all suspects again. All of them? I asked, even Victoria? She's the only one who has not yet lied. That concerns me. Most people lie to stay out of trouble. She may be telling the truth to stay in it. You do realize that makes no sense. Wolfe arched an eyebrow. Then we are finally close. If Nero Wolfe ever hosted a dinner party, you wouldn't come for the food, though Fritz would knock your socks off. You'd come for the blood. Not literally, mind you. Wolfe didn't do mess. But the man could roast a confession better than he could a pheasant. And tonight, we were setting the table. It was a Wednesday, which meant omelets for lunch, a bottle of Mosel Riesling, and exactly 12 minutes of orchid inspection. At precisely 3 p.m., Wolfe summoned me to the office. "Archie," he said, folding his hands like a bored poke. "Call them all. Tell them I have something to say. And make it sound as if they'll regret not coming. Is that your version of charm?" "No, it is bait." The guest list was, in my opinion, a cocktail of combustible personalities. Victoria Vale, daughter of the dearly dead, all pearl earrings and cautious posture. Anthony Broome, lawyer with secrets in his sleeves and maybe blood on his cuffs. Geraldine Vance, publicist turned puppet master. Joel Herrick, the harmless accountant with a face like a drying sponge dot, and for flavor, Lieutenant Roqueliff, who didn't know he was invited until I sent the cab for him. They arrived and staggered. Unease, each carrying the kind of posture you get when you expect a lecture, a slap, or both. Wolfe was seated, of course, at his desk. I played the loyal Labrador in my usual chair. The office was thick with heat, tension, and Italian leather. "I thank you for coming," Wolfe began. "My assistant tells me I should begin with an apology." "I shall not." Victoria flinched slightly. Broome narrowed his eyes. Geraldine checked her nails. Herrick blinked like a man allergic to confrontation. Roqueliff just crossed his arms and waited for Wolfe to hang himself. Wolfe continued, "You are here because I have solved the murder of Felix Vale. I now know who removed the letter, who typed the second version, and who strangled a man in his study while classical music played 2 floors above." He paused. "A long one. The kind you could pour into a glass and serve chilled. But," he said, "I shall not say the name yet." This time it was Geraldine who cracked. "Then why summon? U.S.? To watch you gloat?" "Not gloat, Miss Vance. Observe. Here's where it got fun." Wolfe nodded to me. I pulled a plain manila envelope from the drawer, opened it, and withdrew a single sheet of white paper. "The letter," I announced. That got their attention. Victoria leaned forward. Broome stood up halfway, then sat back down. Even Roqueliff looked vaguely interested. "This," Wolfe said, "is the original. The real one. Not the edited fabrication that Geraldine Vance attempted to substitute." "I never," she started, but Wolfe raised one finger. "Miss Vance," he said coolly, "I had the paper fibers analyzed. Used a typewriter that had not been serviced since 1996. It leaves a peculiar notch in its lowercase r, a notch that appears," he gestured, "here, here, and here." He tapped the paper with surgical precision. Broome looked ill. Geraldine went pale. Herrick began to sweat visibly. Victoria looked relieved. But Wolfe went on. "Miss Vance did not kill Felix Vale. She merely attempted to frame his suicide as politically inconvenient. The death itself, violent, unexpected, and unpremeditated, belongs to someone else." He glanced toward Herrick. I did too. His skin had gone from beige to eggshell. His lips twitched. "Mr. Herrick," Wolfe said, "you were present that night. You never left the house." The maid Flora overheard footsteps heading back toward the study at 10:42. Not away from it, but toward. "That proves nothing," Herrick said, "but it aligns with everything. The wine glass found beside Vale had your fingerprints. Your attempt to clean the record player, sloppy. And the missing wire used in the strangulation? Cut from your own briefcase handle, leather binding and all." Herrick rose, then sat back down. "I didn't mean to kill him," he said hoarsely. "I just wanted to scare him." Roqueliff shot to his feet. "Is this a confession?" Wolfe sighed. "Unfortunately, yes. But as usual, I must spell it out." The breakdown, Wolfe style. Herrick had discovered that Vale was planning to expose fraudulent activity going back decades. Activity that would land both him and Broome in prison. He typed the fake letter on an old office typewriter and convinced Vance it was real. When Vale refused to retract, Herrick went to his study to talk. Rage met panic. He used the wire from his own bag in a fit of desperation. The body was staged. The edited letter was inserted. And the rest, as they say, was theater. Victoria Vale stood up. You let me believe it was a suicide. I let you believe nothing. Wolfe said. I needed you to believe that so the killer could breathe. She looked at me. I shrugged. Rochliff made the arrest without drama. Herrick didn't struggle. Geraldine muttered curses all the way to the elevator. Broom stayed behind a minute. Tell him I'm sorry, he said. For what? For not believing he was still dangerous. Then he left. Back upstairs, Wolfe poured himself a bottle of beer and finally reclined. You see, Archie? He murmured. All letters lie, even the ones not written. I leaned back. I'll file that under wisdom or indigestion. The phrase showdown in the office might conjure images of guns drawn, accusations flying, and someone diving behind Wolfe's bookshelf. But Wolfe's version was different. No one bled, no one ran. People just broke apart, slowly, under the weight of one man's relentless logic. By 8 o'clock that evening, every suspect was back in the office, including those who'd earlier tried to slink away with reputations intact. The carpet was vacuumed. The chairs were arranged. The lighting was set to just this side of interrogation room dim. Wolfe was in position behind his desk, big and still and unreadable. I had the honor of playing usher, valet, and stage manager. Fritz brought in tea, but no one drank it. Thank you all for returning, Wolfe said, not even glancing at anyone. As I mentioned earlier, I now have conclusive evidence as to who killed Felix Vale. But more than that, I know why. You could have heard the internal bracing. Geraldine crossed her legs the other way. Broom fidgeted with a gold pen. Rochliff narrowed his eyes and gave me a look that said, if this falls apart, it's on you. I gave him a look right back that. Sod, wait for it. Wolfe began with the broad strokes. Felix Vale was not a martyr, nor was he a saint. He was a man who had made enemies. He was about to reveal documents that could ruin not just one, but several careers, including his own daughter's political future. But that's not why he was killed. That got Victoria's attention. She looked at Wolfe with the kind of dread that comes from suspecting you've been protected from a much uglier truth. He was killed, Wolfe continued, because he tried to change the narrative, and because someone feared that change. He paused. Mr. Herrick? The accountant gave a weak nod, the kind that said, do what you have to. Wolfe obliged. Joel Herrick, Wolfe said, was the instrument, but he was not the instigator. Herrick's head jerked up. What are you? You were manipulated, Mr. Herrick. Pressured. Fed selective documents. Even the false letter Geraldine Vance gave you, that wasn't her invention. She received it, typed and ready, by courier. Anonymous. Vance bolted upright. That's not true. Do sit, Wolfe said without even raising his voice. You knew it was false. You also knew who sent it. But you lacked the stomach to confront them. Who? Broom said. Who sent it? Wolfe turned. Why don't you? Tell us, Mr. Broom. The silence was a thunderclap. Everyone turned to the man in the navy pinstripe suit, the one who had been the most careful, the most composed, until now. Broom blinked once, then twice, then gave a slow, rueful smile. Well, he said, that took longer than I expected. He stood, brushed imaginary lint from his lapel, and looked down at Wolfe. May I smoke? No, Wolfe replied. Broom sat again and gave the kind of confession that wasn't a confession, not legally anyway. But in this room, it was enough. Double quotes. Yes, I sent the letter. Yes, I nudged poor Herrick into believing Vale had to be stopped. But I didn't strangle him, if that's what you're implying. I'm not implying, Wolfe said. I'm correcting. You didn't strangle Vale, but you ensured someone would. Victoria Vale stood. You used me. Don't flatter yourself, Broom replied coolly. I used your father's reputation. Rochliff stepped forward. You're admitting to conspiracy. Conspiracy, Broom said. is such an enthusiastic word. I prefer orchestration. Wolfe didn't flinch. You saw the storm coming, Mr. Broom. Vale's reform papers would implicate dozens, yourself included. You needed a scapegoat. And a dead man doesn't talk. Broom spread his hands. And yet here we are, talking. Not for long, Rockcliffe said. You'll never make it stick, Broom replied, already standing again. I didn't lay a hand on the man. No, Wolfe said. But you lied to every investigator. Fabricated evidence. Pushed a frightened man toward panic. He nodded toward Herrick. You broke him. And now he's breaking you. Herrick looked down, not proud. But not protecting him anymore. That's when Wolfe did something unusual. He stood. Yes, you read that right. He rose, carefully, and faced Broom like a judge about to issue a private verdict. You may think yourself clever, Mr. Broom, but you lack the imagination to understand that guilt comes not from the action alone, but from its deliberate design. Then he sat, and just like that, the game was over. Rockcliffe moved in, badge up. Broom didn't resist. Geraldine began crying, or maybe faking. Victoria sat motionless, like a statue realizing it had no pedestal. I opened the door. The suspects became ex-suspects. The air cleared, almost. When the office was empty, and the noise had receded like the tide, I turned to Wolfe. That was dramatic, I said. It was necessary. Do you think they'll pin anything on Broom that sticks? Yes, he said, but not in court, in memory. You learn to watch for it, the moment someone breaks. It's never like in the movies. There's no thunderclap or dramatic scream. It's quieter, smaller, like a hairline fracture in glass that once seen can't be unseen. And tonight we had one of those moments. I was halfway through pouring Wolfe's post-victory beer when Fritz called down to say that Victoria Vale had returned. Alone. Wolfe looked up from his bottle like a priest interrupted mid-sermon. Alone? Yes, sir, Fritz said. She says she needs to speak to you. She's not a suspect, I said. She's just a daughter who got spun in someone else's web. Precisely, Wolfe muttered. Send her in. She walked in looking the same, but not. Her poise hadn't left her, but it had been dented. She sat without waiting for permission and folded her hands like she was bracing for a verdict. I should have known, she said. Wolfe made a non-committal noise. That meant he was listening. I should have known Broom wasn't just protecting the firm or my father's image. He was protecting himself. But I didn't see it until you spelled it out. Wolfe gave her a long look. No one sees betrayal coming from the direction of loyalty. That is its camouflage. She blinked twice, but didn't cry. I need to tell you something, she said. Not because I want to confess, but because I need to know if you already know. That's a curious phrasing, I said, easing into my usual seat near the coulee fireplace. You're not confessing, but you're about to say something that might sound like one. She glanced at me. You're sharper than you pretend, Mr. Goodwin. Lady, I said, that's practically a valentine. She turned to Wolfe. I knew the letter was fake, she said. From the beginning. I didn't know Broom had made it, but I knew Geraldine didn't type it. She doesn't even own a typewriter. Why didn't you say so? Wolfe asked. Because the alternative meant admitting that I let it happen. That I watched my father panic over something false, and I didn't stop him. He thought the letter was proof that his enemies were about to expose him. I could have told him it wasn't real. I could have stopped him from confronting Herrick, but I didn't. You let him fall, I said, because part of you believed he deserved to. Her silence was the answer. He wasn't the man people thought, she finally said. He taught me to lie early. Told me it was a necessary tool. He called it strategic narrative management, but it was lying. That's all it was. And when he said he was going to reveal everything to clean his soul before he died, I hated him for it. She looked up. Does that make me a killer? No, Wolfe said, and his voice was firmer than I expected. It makes you human. After she left, I watched Wolfe go through one of his quieter post-case rituals, touching each orchid leaf in the corner as if the plants were co-conspirators. It was late, but not late enough for him to retreat upstairs. "You're going to say she was telling the truth." I said. "She was, but she also let it happen." "Yes," Wolfe said. "So did Herrick, so did Geraldine. And so, to some degree, did you." "Me? You failed to report that Broom's cufflink was missing when you searched the coat closet." "That made me straighten." "You knew?" I asked. "I suspected. But I wanted to see if you'd mention it unprompted. And you didn't." I poured myself a drink and didn't argue. There's a rule in Wolfe's world. Justice is rarely clean. You don't get neat resolutions or prison cell endings with moral bodies. You get truths. And sometimes, that's the punishment. Victoria Vale would live with the knowledge that her silence helped nudge a desperate man off a moral cliff. Herrick would carry the ghost of Felix Vale to his grave. And Broom? Broom would rot from the inside out, knowing he'd been caught not by a bullet or a badge, but by a sentence Wolfe hadn't even finished saying. Later that night, Wolfe said something I didn't expect. "Mr. Goodwin? Yeah? Would you have told me about the cufflink eventually?" I thought about it. I was waiting to be sure it mattered. "It always matters," he said. Then he closed his eyes and said no more. You'd think that after nailing a killer, or at least peeling back every lie until someone folded, I'd get a better ending than paperwork and cold coffee. But that's what happens in the Wolfe universe. You don't ride into sunsets. You file things alphabetically and hope Fritz saved you a slice of that pear tart dot the day after the fireworks. The brownstone was unusually quiet. No phones ringing. No orchid watering. No Fritz humming in the kitchen. Wolfe had retreated upstairs with a decanter and a copy of the Canterbury Tales in Latin, of course. I was left in the office, wrapping up the kind of loose ends you don't see in mystery novels. Item 1. Geraldine. She'd taken the morning train back to Connecticut, with Wolfe's assurance that she'd be kept out of any formal accusations. She hadn't typed that letter, obviously, but she'd pretended not to know it was fake. I suppose that's the theme of this one. Pretending not to know. Item 2. Broom. The cops had him under protective observation, which is a phrase. That means they're watching you sweat before they make you boil. Wolfe had handed them the original ribbon cartridge from Broom's office typewriter. Yes, he had one hidden in a lower drawer. And yes, it matched the forged letter down too. The smudged E. He didn't confess, of course. He just looked at Wolfe and said, "You don't understand what was at stake." To which Wolfe had replied, "On the contrary, I understand precisely. That's why you lost." Item 3. Victoria Vale. She sent Wolfe a handwritten letter on real stationery, in actual cursive. That alone nearly gave Wolfe a coronary. She wrote, "Man in the navy pinstripe suit, the one who had been the most careful, the most composed, until now." Broom blinked once, then twice, then gave a slow, rueful smile. "Well," he said, "that took longer than I expected." He stood, brushed imaginary lint from his lapel, and looked down at Wolfe. "May I smoke?" "No," Wolfe replied. Broom sat again and gave the kind of confession that wasn't a confession, not legally anyway. But in this room, it was enough. Double quotes. "Yes, I sent the letter. Yes, I nudged poor Herrick into believing Vale had to be stopped. But I didn't strangle him, if that's what you're implying." "I'm not implying," Wolfe said. "I'm correcting. You didn't strangle Vale, but you ensured someone would." Victoria Vale stood. "You used me." "Don't flatter yourself," Broom replied coolly. "I used your father's reputation." Rockcliffe stepped forward. "You're admitting to conspiracy." "Conspiracy," Broom said, "is such an enthusiastic word. I prefer orchestration." Wolfe didn't flinch. "You saw the storm coming, Mr. Broom. Vale's reform papers would implicate dozens, yourself included. You needed a scapegoat. And a dead man doesn't talk. Broom spread his hands. And yet here we are, talking. Not for long, Rockcliffe said. You'll never make it stick, Broom replied, already standing again. I didn't lay a hand on the man. No, Wolfe said. But you lied to every investigator. Fabricated evidence. Pushed a frightened man toward panic. He nodded toward Herrick. You broke him. And now he's breaking you. Herrick looked down, not proud. But not protecting him anymore. That's when Wolfe did something unusual. He stood. Yes, you read that right. He rose, carefully, and faced Broom like a judge about to issue a private verdict. You may think yourself clever, Mr. Broom, but you lack the imagination to understand that guilt comes not from the action alone, but from its deliberate design. Then he sat, and just like that, the game was over. Rockcliffe moved in, badge up. Broom didn't resist. Geraldine began crying, or maybe faking. Victoria sat motionless, like a statue realizing it had no pedestal. I opened the door. The suspects became ex-suspects. The air cleared, almost. When the office was empty and the noise had receded like the tide, I turned to Wolfe. That was dramatic, I said. It was necessary. Do you think they'll pin anything on Broom that sticks? Yes, he said, but not in court, in memory. You learn to watch for it, the moment someone breaks. It's never like in the movies. There's no thunderclap or dramatic scream. It's quieter, smaller, like a hairline fracture in glass that once seen can't be unseen. And tonight we had one of those moments. I was halfway through pouring Wolfe's post-victory beer when Fritz called down to say that Victoria Vale had returned. Alone. Wolfe looked up from his bottle like a priest interrupted mid-sermon. Alone? Yes, sir, Fritz said. She says she needs to speak to you. She's not a suspect, I said. She's just a daughter who got spun in someone else's web. Precisely, Wolfe muttered. Send her in. She walked in looking the same but not. Her poise hadn't left her, but it had been dented. She sat without waiting for permission and folded her hands like she was bracing for a verdict. I should have known, she said. Wolfe made a non-committal noise. That meant he was listening. I should have known Broom wasn't just protecting the firm or my father's image. He was protecting himself. But I didn't see it until you spelled it out. Wolfe gave her a long look. No one sees betrayal coming from the direction of loyalty. That is its camouflage. She blinked twice, but didn't cry. I need to tell you something, she said. Not because I want to confess, but because I need to know if you already know. That's a curious phrasing, I said, easing into my usual seat near the fireplace. You're not confessing, but you're about to say something that might sound like one. She glanced at me. You're sharper than you pretend, Mr. Goodwin. Lady, I said, that's practically a valentine. She turned to Wolfe. I knew the letter was fake, she said. From the beginning. I didn't know Broom had made it, but I knew Geraldine didn't type it. She doesn't even own a typewriter. Why didn't you say so? Wolfe asked, because the alternative meant admitting that I let it happen. That I watched my father panic over something false, and I didn't stop him. He thought the letter was proof that his enemies were about to expose him. I could have told him it wasn't real. I could have stopped him from confronting Herrick, but I didn't. You let him fall, I said, because part of you believed he deserved to. Her silence was the answer. He wasn't the man people thought, she finally said. He taught me to lie early. Told me it was a necessary tool. He called it strategic narrative management, but it was lying. That's all it was. And when he said he was going to reveal everything, to clean his soul before he died, I hated him for it. She looked up. Does that make me a killer? No, Wolfe said, and his voice was firmer than I expected. It makes you human. After she left, I watched Wolfe go through one of his quieter post-case rituals, touching each orchid leaf in the corner as if the plants were co-conspirators. It was late, but not late enough for him to retreat upstairs. "You're going to say she was telling the truth?" I said. "She was, but she also let it happen." "Yes," Wolfe said. "So did Herrick, so did Geraldine. And so, to some degree, did you." "Me?" "You failed to report that Broom's cufflink was missing when you searched the coat closet." "That made me straighten. You knew?" I asked. "I suspected. But I wanted to see if you'd mention it unprompted. And you didn't." I poured myself a drink and didn't argue. There's a rule in Wolfe's world. Justice is rarely clean. You don't get neat resolutions or prison cell endings with moral bodies. You get truths. And sometimes, that's the punishment. Victoria Vale would live with the knowledge that her silence helped nudge a desperate man off a moral cliff. Herrick would carry the ghost of Felix Vale to his grave. And Broom? Broom would rot from the inside out, knowing he'd been caught not by a bullet or a badge, but by a sentence Wolfe hadn't even finished saying. Later that night, Wolfe said something I didn't expect. "Mr. Goodwin?" "Yeah? Would you have told me about the cufflink eventually?" I thought about it. I was waiting to be sure it mattered. "It always matters," he said. Then he closed his eyes and said no more. You'd think that after nailing a killer, or at least peeling back every lie until someone folded, I'd get a better ending than paperwork and cold coffee. But that's what happens in the Wolfe universe. You don't ride into sunsets. You file things alphabetically and hope Fritz saved you a slice of that pear tart the day after the fireworks. The brownstone was unusually quiet. No phones ringing. No orchid watering. No Fritz humming in the kitchen. Wolfe had retreated upstairs with a decanter and a copy of the Canterbury Tales in Latin, of course. I was left in the office, wrapping up the kind of loose ends you don't see in mystery novels. Item 1. Geraldine. She'd taken the morning train back to Connecticut, with Wolfe's assurance that she'd be kept out of any formal accusations. She hadn't typed that letter, obviously, but she'd pretended not to know it was fake. I suppose that's the theme of this one. Pretending not to know. Item 2. Broom. The cops had him under protective observation, which is a phrase. That means they're watching you sweat before they make you boil. Wolfe had handed them the original ribbon cartridge from Broom's office typewriter. Yes, he had one hidden in a lower drawer, and yes, it matched the forged letter down to the smudged E. He didn't confess, of course. He just looked at Wolfe and said, "You don't understand what was at stake." To which Wolfe had replied, "On the contrary, I understand precisely. That's why you lost." Item 3. Victoria Vale. She sent Wolfe a handwritten letter. On real stationery, in actual cursive. That alone nearly gave Wolfe a coronary. She wrote, "I don't know if this is gratitude or something else, but I keep thinking about the sound my father made when he read that letter. It wasn't rage or fear, it was relief. Like someone had finally given him permission to stop lying. Thank you for showing me the truth. Even if it stings." Wolfe didn't reply, naturally. But he did. Keep the letter. Which, in our world, is like sending roses. I spent the rest of the day doing the unglamorous stuff. Cleaning the ashtrays, filing notes, locking up transcripts of every conversation we'd had over the past 4 days. Wolfe never dictated them. I just took the liberty. Someday, when he finally kicks off and leaves me this place, which he won't, I'll publish them under a pseudonym and make a fortune. By sundown, I was back in the office chair, feet up, with the window cracked open. The city was doing its usual New York opera car horns, dogs barking, sirens whining in the distance. Same as always, but not quite. Wolfe came down just after 6. He didn't say a word, just moved toward his chair and collapsed into it like a dropped statue. "Would you care for beer?" I asked. "No, brandy." That was new. I poured it for him, and we sat like that for a while. 2 men and a brandy snifter with more silence than conversation. After a minute I said, "This one was different." "Yes," Wolfe said. "It was." "You Mean because of the forged letter? No, because no one wanted the truth, not even the victim. Especially not the victim. He sipped the brandy. It's easier to forge words than to speak them, he added. That's why the forgery worked. There was something weighty in the air. Not sadness exactly, but something shaped like it. I looked over at him and said, "You don't think justice was done?" "I think the truth came out," Wolfe replied. "Justice is another department," I nodded. That was about as philosophical as he got. After that, he went quiet again. I let the silence stretch because sometimes it's better that way. Eventually, I stood, dusted my jacket, and headed for the door. "Archie," Wolfe called out just as I reached the threshold. "Yeah?" "Make sure the letter is filed under V." I grinned. "Vale or Victoria?" "Either," he said, and closed his eyes again. That's how it ends. No standing ovation. No parades, just a folded letter, an empty glass, and a detective who preferred orchids to people, except when people lied. Then he paid attention. As for me, I still had a cab to catch, a steakhouse calling my name, and a date with a blonde who still thought I sold accounting systems. But that's another story. For now, just know this. The secretary didn't type that letter, but she read it. And so did everyone else who didn't want to know what it said. It was 4 days later. The case had cooled off and the press never made front page. Just a few blurbs about corporate intrigue and a shocking forgery discovered in a Manhattan executive office. Wolfe, as usual, got no mention. Neither did I. Which was fine. Was halfway through a lazy Thursday when the doorbell rang. Fritz answered. He's better suited for trays and soufflés than visitors, but Wolfe insists on protocol. I was in the front room doing my usual crossword when Fritz appeared with a small envelope. "It's hand-delivered," he said. "From Miss Vale." That got my attention. I took the envelope. No perfume. No dramatic flourish. Just cream paper, heavy stock, and my name written with the kind of pen that means serious business. I opened it. "Mr. Goodwin, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. I realize we left things at a strange angle. I'm writing because something has happened, something I didn't expect. I've received another letter, typed, folded the same way, but this one is dated yesterday. It's unsigned. Please destroy this note after reading. Or don't. Yours reluctantly, Victoria." Now, I've gotten a few odd things in the mail in my time, brides, threats, even a baby tooth once. Don't ask. But this felt different. Not just in what it said, but how it said it. There was a shakiness to the language, like the rhythm of someone used to control who just found herself back in the passenger seat. I tucked the letter into my inside coat pocket and knocked twice on the office door before stepping in. Wolfe was there, of course, reclined, digesting. "You're going to want to see this," I said, handing over the envelope. He didn't look up. Just opened it with his thumb and read silently. He read it twice, then folded it in half and placed it carefully beside the blotter. "That," he said, "is either a lie, a warning, or the start of another case." "Or all three," I offered. He closed his eyes. "Bring Miss Vale here, discreetly, and Archie, no dramatics." "Me? I'm the picture of discretion." "I doubt that very much." It was raining when I got to her building. One of those tight, vertical downpours that makes you question every decision you've ever made about suede shoes. Victoria let me in without a word. She was in jeans and a sweater this time, human-sized. No diamonds, no presentation. She handed me the letter, like it was a confession. Same paper, same typeface, same smudged E. But this one was different. It didn't accuse. It didn't explain. It simply said, "You still don't understand." He wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting someone else. Look deeper. That was it. I looked at Victoria. "You believe it?" "I don't know." "That's the worst part. You keep getting these," I said, "and I'm going to start charging postage." She cracked the tiniest smile. "Tell him," she said. "Tell Mr. Wolfe. I'm not sure I want to know who sent it." "Then why call us?" "Because not knowing might be worse." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe didn't comment as I relayed her message. He took the new letter, read it slowly, and placed it next to the old one. Lined them up like witnesses at a police station. Then he reached for his beer. A long sip. "I told you," he said. "Forgery is easier than truth." He closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. "I don't know if we'll follow that thread. Wolfe's like that. Sometimes he picks at things. Sometimes he lets them rot. And sometimes he hands me a name and an address and says, 'Find out what they had for breakfast 3 years ago.' So I wait. I watch and I keep the letters, just in case, because the secretary didn't type that letter, but someone else did, and maybe they're still typing." There's a drawer in Wolfe's office third from the left, beneath the bookshelf where he keeps Pliny and Plutarch and the first editions no one's allowed to touch unless they're wearing gloves and reverence. That drawer's where we file the odd ones. The cases that don't close all the way. The ones that leave behind a scent. This one's going in there. Not because Wolfe didn't solve it. He did, in typical Wolfe fashion, without leaving the house, without raising his voice, and without explaining a damn thing until it was over and everyone else looked like an idiot. But because of what didn't make it into the report, you won't read about it in the papers. The cops got what they wanted: a murderer, a motive, and a trail of typed letters that pointed just far enough away from the company's top brass to keep the stock price stable. Inspector Kramer grunted his way through the paperwork, and the DA tied it up with a ribbon and a shrug. But we knew better. And by we, I mean Wolfe, and me, to the extent that he let me take the forged letter, the one that kicked this whole thing off. Wolfe knew the moment he touched the envelope that it hadn't come from the supposed sender. Said the glue was too fresh. Said the fold was too clean. Said no one who's truly afraid folds paper like that. I called it a guess. He called it deduction. He was right, of course. He always is. And he always hates it. There's a line Wolfe likes to throw out when he's feeling particularly Socratic. "The truth, Mr. Goodwin, is a hydra. Cut off one head and 2 more sprout in its place, each uglier, hungrier, and more inconvenient." He said that the night we wrapped up the case over roast duck and asparagus spears that Fritz had charmed into existence, Wolfe had eaten enough to dull his sharper instincts. His eyes were heavy, but his tone was sharp. "I don't like this one," he said. "You don't like any of them, this one less." I didn't argue, because I didn't either. There was something too smooth about how it ended. Like someone had rehearsed it. Like we'd been handed a riddle already half solved, and told to take credit for the answer. I made my own copy of the key documents. Wolfe doesn't know. He wouldn't approve. But I did it anyway. Because someday, someone's going to ask about Victoria Vale and the company whose secrets were locked in the secretary's drawer. And I want to have something to show them that isn't just a shrug and a wisecrack. Besides, there's still one thing Wolfe never explained. You see, there was a page missing from the logbook in the lavender room. The page before the forgery. I mentioned it once. Just once. Wolfe waved it off. Said it was trivial and irrelevant. But here's the thing. Wolfe never waves anything off. Which means he knows exactly what was on that page and exactly why it had to disappear. It's late now. I'm writing this in my room, feet kicked up, tie loosened. The city's insomnia humming outside the window. I can hear Wolfe upstairs, arguing with Theodore about the night-blooming orchids. I can hear Fritz in the kitchen, polishing something that probably doesn't need polishing. And I can hear my own gut telling me that this case isn't done, not really. Victoria Vale's back at her office. The company's PR machine is running smooth. But someone's still typing. And someday, another letter will come. And when it does, we'll be here, drawer open, file waiting.